At 2:28 in the morning, a medical device stopped transmitting. Not because it failed, because someone made sure it went silent. An 84-year-old woman was alone in a house that nobody could find from the road. A house that someone had spent weeks, maybe months, quietly studying, learning, mapping, the doors, the cameras, the schedule, the medication she needed every single day to stay alive. Whoever took her knew all of it, every detail. Except one. And that one detail? It is the reason this case is about to crack wide open. They planned almost everything, almost. Before we get into this, drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? What is the weather like today? I always ask because this community watches from everywhere, and cases like this one deserve as many eyes on them as possible. You stay with me. What happened to this woman, and how investigators are closing in, is something you need to hear all the way through. Nancy Guthrie was 84 years old and still living on her own terms. Her home sat in the Catalina foothills, an elevated, quiet residential community north of Tucson, Arizona. The kind of neighborhood where houses are set back from the road, surrounded by desert landscape, and separated from the noise of the city below. It was not a flashy address, it was a private one, and that privacy was something Nancy had built deliberately over the years. She was not a public figure. She did not have a social media presence. She was not someone whose name appeared in headlines. She was a mother, a woman who managed her own household, kept her own schedule, and lived with the kind of quiet independence that people her age work hard to maintain. Her daughter Savannah is a familiar face to millions of Americans, a co-anchor on NBC's Today Show. Her other daughter Annie lives a more private life, but neither of their public profiles tells you much about who Nancy was. What tells you something is the fact that at 84 she was still in that house, still managing it, still choosing to live independently in a home that required real upkeep in the Arizona heat. She had people who helped with that, the yard, the pool, the maintenance that a property like that demands. People who came and went on a regular basis. People who became familiar with the house over time. That detail matters more than it might seem right now. Because on the night of January 31st going into February 1st, and someone who knew that house, knew it very well, came back. 23:48. Here is what the cameras recorded, 1:47 a.m. The doorbell camera at the front of Nancy Guthrie's home went dark. Not a technical glitch, not a power failure. Someone was at the front door, and within moments that camera stopped recording, 2:12 a.m. The motion detection system registered activity near the front entrance. But there was no footage, because by that point the doorbell had been physically removed from its mounting on the wall. 2:28 a.m. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker made its final sync with her iPhone. That device, the one keeping her heart in rhythm, the one her body depended on, transmitted its last signal, and then it went quiet. No error, no alarm, just silence. 2:36 a.m. A Ring camera on a back road approximately 2.5 miles from Nancy's home captured a vehicle moving through the area at speed. 8 minutes after that final pacemaker signal, moving away from the neighborhood. 4 timestamps. 41 minutes between the first and the last. 41 minutes. That number is going to mean something very specific before this video is done. But right now, what matters is this. Whoever was inside that house was there long enough and prepared enough to work through it methodically. This was not a rushed entry. This was not a panicked exit. Every move had a purpose. Which raises the only 2 questions that matter at this point in the investigation. Who was he? And how did he know exactly where to find her? And the FBI's Video Forensic Analysis Unit, the same specialized team that worked the Brian Kohberger case in Idaho, conducted a frame-by-frame dimensional reconstruction of the doorbell footage. They used the actual physical measurements of Nancy Guthrie's door frame, her front steps, and the surrounding landscaping as fixed reference points. Their conclusion? The suspect stands between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches. Average build. And from the moment he appears in that footage, one thing is immediately clear. This man came prepared. He was wearing a mask, 2 layers of gloves, a jacket, at his waist a holstered handgun, never drawn at any point in the footage, not there to fire, there to communicate. You bring a holstered weapon to an elderly woman's home at 1:47 in the morning because you want her to understand immediately that she has no options. It is a psychological tool selected in advance for this specific encounter. On his back, a black 25-liter Ozark Trail hiker pack, a design manufactured exclusively for Walmart. It arrived full, packed before he left wherever this operation was staged from. He knew what he was going to need before he ever set foot on that property. Above the mask, his eyebrows are visible. Below it, a partial mustache. When his arm extended outward during the encounter, his glove rode up slightly, and retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clemente, analyzing the footage for Fox News and Newsweek, noted what appeared to be a marking on the underside of his right wrist, a tattoo. Analysts have also noted what appears to be a ring worn beneath one of the gloves and possibly on the pinky finger. And there is one more detail. Retired FBI Special Agent Jennifer Coffin-Daffer, reviewing the footage frame by frame, spotted a square shape with an antenna visible in the suspect's pants pocket. A communication device. He was not working alone. But here is what nobody fully prepared for. Before we get to what that footage actually revealed, and this is the part that changes everything, make sure you are subscribed. I cover cases like this every week. What I am about to walk you through in the next few minutes is the single most important piece of evidence in this investigation, and it does not come from the FBI. It comes from one moment at a front door that this suspect never saw coming. Do not go anywhere. Here is what the doorbell camera captured before it went dark. The suspect approaches the front door, and then he sees it. The camera mounted at the entrance. What happens next is the most revealing moment in this entire case. He raises his gloved hand and moves it toward the lens, trying to cover it. But the lens is too small. The angle is wrong. The hand does not create a complete seal. It does not work. He steps sideways. He reaches into the decorative planter beside the door. He pulls out a bush, an actual plant, and holds it in front of a security camera. A man who arrived with a loaded backpack, a holstered weapon, a mask, 2 layers of gloves, and a complete operational plan for the inside of that house, improvising with shrubbery at the front door. That moment is not just awkward footage. It is evidence, not of general incompetence. This man was not incompetent. Everything else about his preparation says the opposite. And the evidence points to something far more specific. One precise gap in what he was told before he arrived. Think about the asymmetry carefully. Inside the house, complete preparation. He knew the camera locations. He knew where the recording hardware was stored. He knew the entry point. He navigated the property for 41 minutes in complete darkness without confusion or hesitation. Outside at the front door, nothing. No plan, no tool, no awareness that a camera even existed there. That gap does not appear anywhere else. It falls at exactly one location. The front door, and precise gaps have precise causes. This man was briefed on the inside of that house in significant detail. That briefing was accurate, but whoever put it together either did not know about the doorbell camera or had never once approached that house through the front entrance. How does a man who knew everything about the inside of that house know absolutely nothing about what was on the front door? To understand how significant that gap is, you first need to understand everything he got right. Start with the address. Nancy Guthrie's home sits in the Catalina foothills north of Tucson. Her specific street does not connect to any main road in a way that makes the property visible from passing traffic. You cannot identify the house, the driveway, or the correct turn from a vehicle on a nearby street. To arrive at that front door at 1:47 in the morning and walk directly to the entrance, you had to already know exactly where it was. The entry point, there was no forced entry, no broken door frame, no shattered glass, no kicked-in lock. He walked into that house through a point of access he either had prior knowledge of or had been told about specifically. Getting into a private residence without force does not happen by accident. The interior camera layout. Ring and Nest do not publish where their subscribers place devices inside their homes. That information does not exist in any public database. It is not in property records. It does not appear in court filings or insurance documents. The location of cameras inside a private home exists in exactly one place: the knowledge of whoever has physically been inside long enough to see them, the recording hardware. He did not just know where the cameras were. He knew where the physical storage devices were located, not the cameras themselves. The hardware that held the footage. That is a different and more specific level of knowledge entirely. The schedule. Nancy Guthrie's daily routine is not published anywhere. She is a private individual. There is no public calendar of her movements. To know that on the night of January 31st going into February 1st she would be home, alone, and remain alone through the early hours of the morning, that requires direct access to her private life. The medication. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos confirmed publicly that Nancy relied on daily medication and that missing it would become life-threatening within 24 hours. That is clinical information. It lives in medical records and in the awareness of anyone involved in her health care or daily care routine. Whoever planned this operation knew about that window and factored it in deliberately. It was leverage from the moment she disappeared, the layout of the house itself. He moved through that property for 41 minutes in complete darkness. No hesitation, no wrong turns, no wasted time. That level of comfort in an unfamiliar space in the dark does not come from a floor plan. It comes from having been inside. Every single item on that list is private information. None of it is searchable. None of it is guessable. Every item required either direct personal access to Nancy Guthrie's home and life, or access to someone who had it, which means someone assembled that information and handed it over. So who assembled it? Retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent Jim Clemente introduced a concept in his analysis of this case that helps answer that question. He called it transitory contact. In criminal profiling, transitory contact describes a category of access that doesn't look like a relationship, but still produces detailed knowledge of a private residence over time. Think about what that looks like in practice. A pool technician who visits every 2 weeks. A yard crew that works the property on a regular schedule. An HVAC contractor called out for seasonal maintenance. A caregiver who assists with specific health needs. A delivery driver with a consistent route to that address. None of these people have a personal relationship with the homeowner. None of them would appear on a list of close contacts. But every single one of them has something more useful than friendship. They have physical access. Regular, unremarkable professional access to a private home. And physical access produces observation. Not deliberate intelligence gathering, just the natural result of being present in a space repeatedly over time. You see which rooms are used. You notice the camera mounted near the hallway. You learn whether the homeowner is typically alone or whether family visits regularly. You hear details about medical appointments and daily routines in passing conversation. Over months, sometimes years, of routine service visits, a detailed picture of how that household operates builds itself, without anyone meaning for it to happen. Nancy Guthrie was 84 and living alone in a property that required consistent upkeep. The yard, the pool, the HVAC systems that become critical in Arizona summers. Prescription pickups, medical appointments, occasional repairs. That household did not run without outside help, and every person who provided that help had eyes on a home whose owner likely never thought of it as being observed. Retired Detective Tom McDonough, speaking publicly about this case, said the suspect had almost certainly crossed paths with Nancy before, and pointed specifically to a gardener or delivery person as the likely category of contact. Former NYPD Detective James Stanton described it more precisely. 4 words. Someone tangential to this woman's life. Not a friend, not a family member. Someone at the functional edge of her daily world. Present enough to know, peripheral enough not to be an immediate suspect. Former FBI Special Agent Greg Rogers went further. Speaking on the record exclusively to Parade magazine, Rogers said he believes it is highly likely that someone connected to Nancy's home maintenance, health care, yard, or pool care was directly involved. And then he used a word that matters. Hired. As in, someone with resources and intent identified a person with access to that home and paid for specific information. The security layout, the entry points, the schedule. That is not a theory. That is a former FBI agent of more than 2 decades speaking on the record. Now consider the doorbell gap against that framework. 2 explanations fit. The first, the camera was new. Security systems are not static. Adult children of elderly parents frequently push for video doorbells as a safety measure. If that doorbell was installed or upgraded after the informant's last period of regular access to the property, their knowledge of the interior system would be current and accurate while the front door remained a blind spot. The second, the informant never used the front door. Pool technicians enter through side or rear gates. Yard crews work the perimeter. HVAC contractors come through the garage. A caregiver admitted through a side entrance. Any of these people would build an accurate map of the areas they accessed and have no knowledge of the front elevation at all. Their map was complete within the boundaries of their access, and blank everywhere else. Either way, the result is the same. A briefing was assembled from the inside, inaccurate in every detail that mattered for the operation, and missing exactly one thing. The gap in that briefing is the exact outline of the informant's knowledge. What they knew, he knew. What they missed, he missed. That outline is now the most specific lead investigators have into who provided the map. And that silhouette has a name. Go back to the antenna Jennifer Coffin-Daffer spotted in the suspect's pocket. A walkie-talkie is not a casual choice. You do not carry one by habit. You carry one because you have made a specific decision not to use a cell phone, and you need another way to communicate in real time. Former FBI agent and CIA officer Tracy Walder explained the operational logic clearly. Cell phones triangulate against towers. They produce carrier records within hours. Every call, every text, every data transmission leaves a timestamp and a location tied to a specific device and account. A walkie-talkie operates at short range, requires no account, and leaves nothing on a cell tower. It is untraceable after the fact. It is the communication tool of someone who has specifically thought through how investigators work in the first 48 hours, and made deliberate choices to stay off their radar. That decision explains something investigators have already confirmed. Geofencing the cell tower data around Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood on the night of February 1st has reportedly produced no usable leads. Because the people involved never brought their phones within range, they thought about that in advance and removed that trail entirely before the operation began. Jennifer Coffin-Daffer was direct about what the walkie-talkie means. She posted her conclusion publicly. "No way you commit this abduction by yourself." She is right, because if there was a walkie-talkie in that pocket, there was someone on the other end of it. Most likely outside, possibly behind the wheel of the vehicle, a Ring camera captured on a back road 2.5 miles from Nancy's home at 2:36 in the morning, 8 minutes after her pacemaker went silent. That is 3 points in a single coordinated operation: the person on the porch, the person in the vehicle, and the person who built the map before any of it began. 3 people, 1 network, and somewhere out there, one of them is watching the news right now, wondering how close investigators are getting. I want to pause here for a moment. If you are watching this and something I just said connected to someone you know, a name, a face, in someone in Nancy Guthrie's world who seemed off around the start of February, stay until the end of this video. There is a tip line, there is a reward, and your information stays completely anonymous. 1 call. That is all it takes. Keep watching. Remember that number, 41 minutes. Here is what 41 minutes inside a private residence means from a forensic standpoint. He wore a mask. He wore gloves. He thought about trace evidence. But he never covered his mouth. For the entire duration of his time inside Nancy Guthrie's home, he was breathing. Every exhale carries microscopic biological material. Shed skin cells, respiratory particles, the kind of trace evidence that settles onto furniture, floors, and surfaces without anyone seeing it happen. His eyebrows were exposed above the mask, his eyelashes, a partial mustache, hair follicles shed. And they land, they stay. He was careful about almost everything. He was not careful about this. Pima County Sheriff's Department confirmed that DNA was collected from inside Nancy Guthrie's home that does not belong to Nancy or to anyone in regular close contact with her. That DNA is now in the Investigative Genetic Genealogy Pipeline, IGG. This is the same methodology that identified the Golden State Killer, a man who evaded law enforcement for more than 40 years. IGG does not require the suspect's DNA to already exist in a law enforcement database. It works by searching consumer genealogy platforms, GED Match, Family Tree DNA, building a family tree around the recovered DNA profile, identifying living relatives, and systematically narrowing that tree down to a single individual. It is methodical. It is precise. And it has a track record. Jennifer Coffin-Daffer, when asked about the DNA evidence in this case, was direct. She said she thinks it could really break things open. For a man who made careful decisions about cell phones, communication devices, and entry points, 41 minutes of exposed biology inside that house may be the decision he did not know he was making. The tide is turning. The DNA is one thread. It is not the only one. The vehicle captured on that back road at 2:36 in the morning is being actively traced. Every vehicle that passed that road at that time is being cross-referenced against neighborhood access patterns, registration records, and any known connection to Nancy Guthrie's domestic orbit. That camera caught something. Investigators are working backward from it. The Ozark Trail backpack is another thread, and it is a Walmart-exclusive design, manufactured specifically for Walmart's distribution channel. Investigators initially focused on Walmart purchase records and in-store surveillance footage, but Sheriff Chris Nanos recently revised that picture. The investigation is now expanded to secondary markets. His exact framing, who's to say it wasn't purchased at Walmart and then listed on eBay? The net on that backpack is wider now. But it is still a net. The physical identifiers visible in the footage are being worked against the thousands of tips that have come in. The eyebrows above the mask, the partial mustache, the possible tattoo on the underside of his right wrist, the outline of what appears to be a ring beneath the glove on his pinky finger. A retired FBI Special Agent Jason Pack told CBS News that investigators are specifically asking people to study not just what this man is wearing, but how he moves, his gait, his posture, the proportions of how he carries himself. That is recorded in the footage, and it is identifiable. A dedicated task force, 4 detectives, 1 sergeant, backed by the full analytical resources of the FBI Phoenix Field Office, is embedded at the FBI office in Tucson working these leads. Jennifer Coffin Daffer has been clear about one thing. She firmly believes that multiple people already know who that man is, which means the question is no longer whether this case breaks. It is who breaks it. Former FBI Special Agent Greg Rogers said something about cases like this one that is worth sitting with. And he said the best chance of resolution often comes when one person in the network decides the weight of what they know is heavier than whatever has been keeping them quiet. That weight is real. It has been building for weeks. Every news update, every press conference, every time the DNA pipeline gets mentioned, every time the backpack trace expands into a new market, every time Savannah Guthrie posts on Instagram asking for a miracle and the comments fill up with people who have no idea that someone reading those comments already knows the answer. That is a specific kind of pressure. And it does not get lighter with time, it gets heavier. If you are someone carrying that weight right now, and the family reward in this case is $1 million, the FBI reward is $100,000. Tips are completely anonymous. Even the reward can be paid in cash. No paper trail attached to you, no public exposure, just a phone call or a message that changes the outcome of this case. The calculation that was made on the night of January 31st can be unmade, and somewhere tonight Savannah Guthrie is still on Instagram, still asking, still waiting. Savannah Guthrie stepped away from the Winter Olympics in Milan when her mother disappeared. She came home to Tucson, to that house, to a front door that had no answers. She and her sister Annie have been photographed outside leaving yellow roses. Annie wrote a note addressed directly to her mother, not to the public, not to investigators, to her mother. Those roses are still there. Nancy Guthrie is 84 years old. She built a life in that house. She maintained her independence in that house, and she deserved to grow old in that house on her own terms. She is still missing, not a case file, not a headline. A mother, a woman, still missing. Nancy Guthrie is still missing. If you know something, anything at all, the tip line is in the description below. Your information stays completely anonymous. The family reward is $1 million. The FBI reward is $100,000. Cash. If this case matters to you, hit the like button. Subscribe. Share this video with someone. Every view this gets is another set of eyes on this case. Another person who might recognize those eyebrows, that tattoo, that backpack. Do it for Nancy.